The top 30 adventures of Dungeons & Dragons. Hello everybody, Jordan here, the PH is silent, and D&D has been around for almost 50 years now, and many adventures have been written for Dungeons & Dragons in the various editions, which leads us to the question, what are the greatest adventures in Dungeons & Dragons? For this video, I'm digging into an old Dungeon Magazine article that, during the 30th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons, highlighted the 30 greatest adventures. So hopefully in 2024, for the 50th anniversary, we'll be able to add to this list and come up with the top 50 adventures for Dungeons & Dragons. But first, this video is sponsored by StartPlaying.games. StartPlaying is the largest online platform for players to find tabletop role-playing games and professional GMs for any system and any virtual tabletop. Find a game that works for you and your schedule and people who are excited to play the system or adventure that you are excited to play. So check out StartPlaying.games today by clicking the link in the description, and thanks again, StartPlaying.games. I'm gonna edit this up into 3 different videos. So we're gonna have the 30 to 21, the 20 to 11, and then 10 to number 1. And I'll give a brief summary of every adventure, but I wanted to preface with that these were chosen again for the 30th anniversary of Dungeons & Dragons back in 2004 by a dungeon design panel. The panel included 16 people who were very involved with Dungeons & Dragons and tabletop RPGs during the time, and I'm sure you'll recognize a few names. Keith Baker, Wolfgang Bauer, Eric L. Boyd, Andy Collins, Monty Cook, Bruce R. Cordell, Ed Greenwood, Gary Holian, Alan Kohler, Mike Merles, Christopher Perkins, Clark Peterson, Chris Premis, Gene Rabb, John D. Ratliff, and Bill Slavicic. Now, I want to preface that many of these adventures you probably won't recognize. I didn't recognize several of them, but they all have an important part to play in the evolution of adventure design in Dungeons & Dragons. So they weren't necessarily chosen because of the most fun, but really the most memorable in the scale of adventure design. Before we had streaming D&D shows and D&D podcasts, the idea of creating a shared experience was done through modules that many other people played. So for example, you might have a Rise of Tiamat story on how you thwarted Tiamat's rise to the material plane, but others who played the same module would have a similar story because they also ran through the adventure. Kind of like reading a good book and talking over your favorite scenes with a friend. So these adventures specifically would leave the player and dungeon master with something fun, interesting, memorable, and probably deadly to talk about with others. There will be timestamps and links to the adventures down below in the description. Let's get started. Number 30. The Ghost Tower of Inverness from 1980. Now, I hadn't heard of this. It was created as a tournament module for WinterCon 8, which was in Detroit, November of 1979, and later published in 1980. It was designed for the Greyhawk setting. The Ghost Tower was an invisible tower that holds a magical artifact called the Soul Gem. And the reason this adventure stands out is that if you snatch the Soul Gem too greedily, it will shoot out rays that rips the soul from the player character, leaving them colorless, lifeless husks. Ouch. Number 29, The Assassin's Knot from 1983. This is the second in a small series of adventures. The first was called Secret of Bone Hill, and it's influential because it is a murder mystery. Within the adventure, there are timelines for the villain's actions. So if the adventurers waste time doing something else, the villain continues to progress their schemes. Something pretty new at the time. Not a lot of games had done this before, and it really ends on a fun climactic battle once the players figure out what's really going on. After reading through this one, I actually really like it, and I think I would run it. Number 28, The Lost City from 1982. Made for basic Dungeons & Dragons, this adventure was a 5-story ziggurat with crazed cultists centered around the demon Zargon. There are some standard traps, puzzles, and a lot of fights. Many adventures could spawn off of this module, but what made it stand out is that it was the first to use isometric maps of a dungeon. Number 27, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh from 1981. This adventure did get a 5e remake when Ghosts of Saltmarsh came out in 2019. The adventure starts out investigating a haunted house, but turns a hard right when everything is discovered to just be pirates. I've run a 5e version of this and really enjoyed it. The fake haunted house to start is super fun, and then the pirate activity kind of cascades into lots of water adventures. It's awesome. You should go out and get Ghosts of Saltmarsh. Underrated module. Maybe it's not underrated. Maybe it's really popular. I think more people should talk about it. Number 26, City of Skulls from 1993. This is a Greyhawk adventure for AD&D 2nd edition, and this was the first adventure to use a notoriety system. The DM must make notoriety checks during the campaign, and on a failure, there's a hit squad that is dispatched to seek out and destroy the player characters. Now, the higher the player's notoriety score becomes, the more powerful and brutal the hit squad is. And so it really behooved the players to pick their battles and choices carefully. If they were able to keep their notoriety low, such as if the characters were not seen performing a specific action, or if they didn't leave witnesses to something that they did, they could, go underneath the people in charge. The adventure as a whole was to rescue someone from a demigod's magical, inescapable prison. It was pretty cool. Number 25, Dragons of Despair from 1984. This is our first Dragonlance adventure that's on the list. The players go on an adventure to return divine magic to the world by recovering a relic from an evil dragon's clutches. The maps were very complex, and the adventure was just memorable. You could even play as the heroes of the Lance, as the adventure came with mini character sheets and actually sheet music for an in-game song, which I thought was really cool. The cover is awesome, and there's a great scene where a black dragon comes shooting out of a well and attacks a whole bunch of people. Number 24, City of the Spider Queen from 2002. This is the Forgotten Realms, the Underdark, Drow, Lolth. There's lots going on in this adventure, and it's become a favorite because of those things. Now, this was a tie-in adventure to the War of the Spider Queen book series, where Lolth went silent and her divine magic was taken away from her Drow priests. The priests of Lolth, who rule the Underdark, kept that little note secret so that their enemies would not know their magical weakness at this time. So the final battle of this adventure is a multi-dimensional temple that shifts between the material and ethereal planes. And there's also Drider vampires, which is another reason that it's really cool. You should check it out. City of the Spider Queen. Number 23 is the Forgotten Temple of Tharizdun from 1982. Tharizdun has become a popular villain as the Chained God or Lost God or Forgotten God. He's always hidden away in adventures like the Temple of Elemental Evil, but in this one, below an old temple, there exists an artifact known as the Black Cyst, which may be Tharizdun's prison, or perhaps the sleeping god himself. Once you reach the Black Cyst, there are some fun interactions to grab magic items there and leave. The adventure was popular because Tharizdun was popular, and this gave more background to Tharizdun and the world of Greyhawk as a whole. Number 22, The Lost Caverns of Soj-Canth. This is from 1982. This was originally a tournament module, but then was reissued as just a regular module. The adventurers must trek into the mountains to find lost treasure of the witch queen Igwilv, which is Tasha of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. A very important magical item in Greyhawk was Daud's wondrous lanthorn, which was located here, and Igwilv became a staple of Dungeons & Dragons because of this module. Full of traps, you get to fight Igwilv's vampire daughter. I mean, the adventure included many new monsters, but it also made the caverns a very well-known place. And number 21, this is the Dark Tower from 1980. And now this is a unique piece of D&D history because I think just about all of the adventures we're going to talk about today are TSR or Wizards of the Coast adventures. And this is a Judges Guild adventure. So not affiliated with either of them, but was immensely popular. The Dark Tower, not affiliated with Stephen King, was huge for the time. And I mean physically. It was an 80-page book that really raised the bar on dungeon delving adventures. Once inside the tower, players had to fight their way all the way down and then back up again with a collapsing tower as you're trying to escape it that had a lot of like Metroid vibes to it, but it came out 6 years before Metroid on the Nintendo Entertainment System. As of 2022, Goodman Games received the license to reprint this classic adventure for D&D 5e and also for their system, Dungeon Crawl Classics. So if you're a collector and you also enjoy older games, it could be fun to pick this up and try it out. Now, later on this list, in a separate video, there are other of these classic adventures that Goodman Games received the license to reprint for 5e. But this one, though, you can get a PDF of because it's not Wizards of the Coast owned IP. So if you're interested in the Dark Tower, it has a really cool cover with a crocodile on it. It's just super cool. I recommend it, I think. But I also like to collect these older ones, so yeah. This brings us to a close to the first 10 of our 30 greatest adventures in Dungeons & Dragons. Which one of these was your favorite? You can let us know down in the comments, and you can also click on the screen to be taken to the next video, which will be adventures 20 through 11. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.